And when did you know you were going to be a showbiz mom?
Not until the Cosby Show, because this was not my, I put my son in the business for an extracurricular activity, not to be in show business. I think it was really not until, like I said, the Cosby Show came along that
Malcolm Jamal Warner was supposed to grow old, to proudly walk his daughter down the aisle, to step onto the stage one last time and light it up with that unforgettable smile the world had known for decades. But instead of that beautiful ending, his life came to a close in silence. A silence heavy it felt like it had been cemented in place forever, until now, when that same silence was torn open by something nobody saw coming. Something that began with a trembling voice, a heartbroken mother, and a small USB drive that was never meant to see daylight, and the woman holding it was Pamela Warner, stepping forward not as a celebrity, not as a figure chasing headlines, but as a grieving mother carrying the unbearable weight of the truth, her eyes swollen from years of crying, her hands shaking as though they held lightning itself, clutching proof that could change the entire story the world thought it knew, her voice cracking but her words striking with the force of a hammer. And in an instant, a man once believed to be untouchable was suddenly facing handcuffs and a kind of spotlight he had spent his life avoiding. Because Bill Cosby was no longer walking free, Malcolm's death was no longer being whispered about as a tragic accident, as Pamela's tear-soaked confession poured out for the world to hear, saying what no mother should ever be forced to say, that her son did not simply drown, that he was drowned by power, drowned by silence, drowned by the same Hollywood machine that shields predators and buries truth, and she had the evidence to prove it. The documents were real, the videos were real, and the pain they captured was the rawest truth of all, from a hidden folder containing a gut-wrenching final video to one chilling memo that read, "Let the water wash it away," which told her everything she needed to know about the way they tried to erase her son, as though he was nothing more than a name on paper. But what they didn't count on was the fire burning inside his mother. And now that fire was burning through the same system that had once thought it could bury the story forever. This was no longer just a scandal. It had become heartbreak mixed with a war cry, a full-scale reckoning, and while Bill Cosby's arrest was huge, Pamela knew it was only the opening scene of a much larger fight, because Malcolm had not left behind a simple goodbye. He had left behind a mission, one so powerful and so loud that his truth was now echoing through every phone screen, every television, every corner of the country. No one saw this moment coming. The scene outside the Los Angeles federal courthouse was a sea of flashing cameras and frantic reporters pushing past barricades while fans stood crying in the streets. A black SUV pulled up slowly, tension as thick as the summer heat, and when the door opened, Bill Cosby stepped out stone-faced, silent, flanked by federal agents on both sides, and the whispers that had circulated for years, the rumors, online threads, the secret conversations suddenly had a face and a headline, because nobody thought it would get this far. Not until Pamela Warner stood up and let the world hear her say the unthinkable words, "He killed my son." Her voice unpolished, without the rehearsed tones of a press statement, but weighted down with the kind of grief that turns into a weapon of truth. And she made it clear she wasn't chasing revenge but justice, not just for Malcolm, but for every silenced voice hidden behind Hollywood's perfect smiles and airtight non-disclosure agreements. And in that moment, the silence that had covered this case was shattered into pieces. The world remembered Malcolm Jamal Warner, not just as the talented actor, but as the heartbeat of a generation. The boy America watched grow up on The Cosby Show. Soul of Theo Huxtable, whose laughter once filled millions of homes. But on July 20th, 2025, that laughter stopped, with the official report claiming he drowned during a peaceful vacation in Costa Rica, painting a picture of an evening walk on the beach with no signs of foul play. No witnesses, no answers, case closed, or so they thought. But mothers do not forget, not the sound of their child's voice in a final phone call, not the unease hidden behind carefully chosen words, not the cryptic warning that echoes forever, "If something happens to me, Mom." Tell the world I wasn't lying. And Pamela couldn't let it go, because something about that official story had felt wrong from the very first day, and her instincts were confirmed when she found the envelope stitched into the lining of Malcolm's old winter coat, containing a USB drive labeled with 5 haunting words, "In case something happens to me." Her hands shook as she plugged it in, and the files she saw shattered her world, a digital vault of nightmares containing confidential memos, call logs, secret recordings, wire transfers, and non-disclosure agreements signed by some of the most powerful figures in the industry. But buried deepest in that archive was a folder named Shadow Network. And inside that folder, one name surfaced again and again, circled, highlighted, repeated: Bill Cosby. And at first, Pamela couldn't piece together why this once beloved television legend would be tied to her son's death, until she opened the video of Malcolm alone, his eyes sunken, his face pale, his voice low and heavy, saying, "If you're seeing this, then I didn't make it, or someone made sure I wouldn't." As he spoke about a hidden system designed not just to cover up abuse, but to erase anyone who knew too much, explaining that they don't just silence you, they erase you, rewriting your entire story so clean and precise that no one even thinks to question it. And in that moment, Pamela dropped to her knees, realizing her son's death was not an accident but a calculated elimination, and she was now holding the smoking gun. So without hesitation, she marched that USB drive and every piece of evidence straight to the Department of Justice. And though weeks passed without a word, one night her phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number reading, "Check the news." And when she turned on the television, every channel was reporting the same breaking news, that the DOJ had confirmed a federal investigation into Malcolm's death, with the headline that exploded across the internet reading, "Bill Cosby under official investigation in connection to Warner case." And within 48 hours a federal warrant was issued, and within 72 hours Bill Cosby was in custody, while Pamela sat quietly in her living room watching the coverage. No celebration, just quiet tears, because after years of being ignored, her son was finally being seen. And outside the courthouse, supporters lit candles, raised posters, painted murals, with one sign hitting her hardest: "He didn't drown, he was drowned." The USB footage began to leak in small, searing fragments, and with each clip that surfaced online, the truth spread like wildfire, igniting rage, grief, and disbelief across the world. Because this wasn't just about the tragic end of a beloved actor, it was about a man who had been hunted in plain sight, his warnings ignored, his voice silenced, and his legacy nearly erased, until his mother decided the world needed to know. And as those haunting final images of Malcolm speaking directly to the camera circulated, whistleblowers began to emerge from the shadows: former studio staff, legal aides, even a late-night show producer, each coming forward with pieces of a puzzle that painted a horrifying picture. One leaked voicemail sent chills across the nation as a trembling voice admitted, "We were told not to touch his footage. We were told to let it disappear." But he knew he had proof, and he was getting ready to go public. And this admission fueled the fire, turning Pamela Warner from a grieving mother into the face of a movement. Her name now carried in headlines around the globe, her words repeated in interviews, and one sentence becoming a rallying cry: "He didn't just die, he was erased." The phrase painted on protest signs, whispered in candlelight vigils, and shouted in the streets of cities that had once turned their backs on victims, but now were united in demanding justice, because this time the story was too big to be buried, too loud to be silenced, and the machine that had once shielded predators was now under siege, with the man once called America's dad standing at the very center of the storm, his reputation shattered, and his legal team scrambling to regain control, public relations firms shutting out reporters, high-powered executives retreating into silence, social media accounts being wiped clean overnight, But it was already too late because the truth was no longer contained in a single drive or a single court case. It was everywhere, and that truth was now impossible to put back in the shadows, especially after the Department of Justice cracked open what the world would soon call the Warner Archive, revealing the monster behind the mask in a way that no scripted drama could ever replicate. It began with a memo dated June 18, 2025, just 2 days before Malcolm's death, stamped confidential and marked for internal use only, with a subject line that read, "Crisis Containment Warner Situation Escalating." And inside that memo was a cold, methodical plan detailing step-by-step how to destroy Malcolm's credibility before he could go public, ending with the chilling directive, if containment fails, redirect through tragedy. The ocean remains a viable optic. And Pamela's blood ran cold because this wasn't poetic or metaphorical. It was a calculated murder plan disguised in corporate language, and that memo was just the beginning. Buried alongside it were dozens of audio files, phone calls, closed door meetings, late-night voice notes, and among them was Malcolm himself, captured while piecing the puzzle together. In one recording, a nervous network executive was heard saying, "He's not a kid anymore. He's smart. He's tracking patterns. If he releases what he has, we are all." Before another voice cut in, calm but lethal, saying, "Then let's make sure he doesn't." And the most devastating discovery of all was what came to be known as Fragment 7, a hidden camera feed with shaky footage, dim light, and grainy pixels, but unmistakably showing Malcolm alone in his home office, scrolling through files, his face tight with anxiety, looking directly into the webcam and exhaling like the weight of the world was on his shoulders, saying, "I shouldn't be recording this, but if I don't, no one will believe it, not even my mom." Before picking up a small voice recorder and lowering his tone to a whisper, "They called me tonight. They told me I'm risking everything, but what am I supposed to do? Stay quiet, let them win." And then 3 sharp knocks at his door froze him in place, his body stiffening before he reached over to shut off the camera, the feed ending abruptly, and Pamela would later say that she never saw her son alive again after that night. So when this clip hit the internet, the reaction wasn't quiet. Morning, it was an eruption, with millions posting messages, tagging their outrage under banners like $ Justice for Malcolm, $ He didn't drown, and $ The machine is falling. Protests sweeping through Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta, Toronto, with Sunset Boulevard spray painted in giant red letters declaring, "He didn't drown. He was silenced," while murals appeared overnight showing Malcolm's face alongside the words, "They erased him. We remember." And celebrities who had stayed silent for years began speaking up. One sitcom star posting, "He told me something big was coming. I didn't listen. I should have," while another castmate went live through tears saying, "He tried to warn us. He really did." And as the outrage grew, the DOJ kept digging, uncovering something even darker, a file ominously titled The Silence Machine Version 2.0, a 32-page blueprint detailing exactly how to erase someone completely without ever laying a hand on them, spelling out how to leak a fake scandal, plant mental health rumors, bury real stories under 8 other news cycles, delay Freedom of Information Act requests, pay off local police, and offer hush money settlements to survivors, proving this wasn't one man protecting Bill Cosby. It was an entire system built to protect the powerful, fueled by money, run by lawyers, and enforced by fear. And Malcolm had hacked into that system, mapping every moving part, preparing to bring it all down before someone got to him first. And then the second leak dropped, this time not from the DOJ, but from inside one of the very networks Malcolm had named in his files, arriving as a plain unmarked package with no return address. Inside was a hard drive containing a single folder labeled Buried, and inside that folder were emails, transcripts, and a chilling risk assessment from Cosby's old PR firm, with one document stating in sterile corporate terms, "If Warner publishes, activate mitigation protocol, monitor movements. If extraction fails, contingency in place." With that word contingency becoming Pamela's obsession because it was a clean boardroom, friendly code for something deadly, and she read it over and over again, 17 times, clutching her son's sweatshirt and whispering through tears, "They planned it. Oh my God, they planned everything." And when Cosby's legal team tried to dismiss the leaks as fake or doctored by hackers, Pamela played the most damning evidence of all, a voice memo Malcolm had recorded without realizing his microphone was still on, the sound of him walking with uneven breath, speaking to himself, saying, "They said I have a choice, stay quiet and live, speak and, well, here we are," followed by a short broken laugh and the words, "I'm not scared anymore, I'm just tired, but I won't be there," before the recording cut to silence, and when Pamela released that clip with the caption, "My son didn't drown. He was drowned by silence, by money, by monsters." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Senators calling for a congressional review, the walls closing in on Cosby and the entire machine, a special counsel appointed, networks launching internal investigations, and federal prosecutors making it clear that Cosby's arrest was just beginning. But Pamela still had one more card to play, a letter Malcolm had left for her that read, "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. But that's okay because I know you'll fight, and I know the truth will outlive me. I love you, Mom. Don't let them erase me." A letter she now carried everywhere, the paper soft and creased from folding, stained with her tears, a constant reminder of the fight she had promised to finish, and as Cosby's mugshot replaced his sitcom smile in the public's memory, he was no longer America's dad, but inmate number unknown, facing a wall of charges, and something far worse, the truth he had tried to bury for decades. The courtroom on that day was thick with a suffocating quiet, not the kind that brings peace but the kind that presses on your chest until breathing feels like work. A silence that screamed without sound as Bill Cosby sat at the defense table, his face an unmoving mask, his shoulders locked in place, flanked by lawyers who no longer looked confident but cornered, their eyes darting toward the door as though they could feel the walls closing in. And across the room stood Pamela Warner, clutching the folded letter her son had left behind, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her gaze fixed forward with the unblinking resolve of a mother who had already lost everything except the truth. Because this trial wasn't just a case, it was a reckoning decades in the making, and the world outside those walls was watching, though cameras weren't allowed inside, because truth has a way of escaping, of slipping through cracks, and one by one witnesses stepped forward, their testimonies cutting through the room like cold steel, former assistants describing the orders to stay quiet, studio editors admitting they were told to delete entire segments, retired executives confessing that they signed non-disclosure agreements under threat, all of them circling back to the same damning point: he knew too much, and they knew it. Until the moment no one could have anticipated arrived, when a man stepped up to the witness stand, a former bodyguard who had once worked for Cosby himself, his voice shaking as he revealed, "I was assigned to watch Malcolm, not to protect him, but to track him." Explaining how at first he hadn't understood the orders, but on the day Malcolm died, he got a phone call with just one sentence: "Stand down, it's handled." A revelation that sent a visible ripple through the courtroom, gasps from the gallery, even the judge's face momentarily frozen, and through it all Cosby remained silent, his expression locked, because what could he possibly say when the conspiracy Malcolm had feared, documented, and warned about was now being spoken into the record for the entire world to hear, making it impossible to bury ever again, and outside, the courthouse steps had transformed into a shrine, lined with candles, photographs, and protest signs, strangers standing shoulder to shoulder, some openly sobbing, others gripping each other's hands, all of them united in a silence that finally meant something, a silence born not of fear but of solidarity. The kind that carries weight instead of shame, while online, millions followed live updates. Hashtags roared back to the top. #justice for Malcolm. #he didn't drown. Number sign the machine is falling. But even in the midst of this tidal wave of truth, Pamela had been holding back one final weapon, a second hard drive, one she hadn't given to the court or to the media, because it wasn't meant for institutions that had already failed her son. It was meant for the people. And when she finally revealed its contents, the scope of what Malcolm had uncovered came into terrifying focus. This wasn't just about Cosby. This was about the entire machine, its blueprints, its operators, and its kill switches. The drive containing surveillance footage, transcripts of closed-door meetings, unsigned contracts marked as off the record, documents stamped "Do Not Disclose Internal Only," and at the center, an operational manual with 2 words burned into the cover, Echo Protocol, described within as a digital kill switch, designed to erase reputations, bury stories, and permanently silence anyone who dared to challenge the machine. And as Pamela uploaded every file without redactions, without filters, without fear, the internet didn't just explode, it imploded. News anchors froze mid-sentence on live broadcasts. High-profile attorneys canceled interviews. Top executives resigned quietly in the dead of night. And entire network feeds went dark, the fallout cascading in real time until the names began to fall one by one. The loudest collapse being the one that started it, all 3 weeks after his arrest. Bill Cosby was officially charged with conspiracy, obstruction, and accessory to murder. And while some in the media clung desperately to the word alleged, the truth had already been carved in stone in Malcolm's voice, in his files, and in Pamela's refusal to let that fire burn out. And she never sought fame or recognition, never wanted the spotlight, but now she was a face the world would never forget, speaking only once to reporters, holding Malcolm's photograph tight to her chest as she said, "They tried to silence him, but all they did was give him a louder voice." Before turning and walking away, no applause, no press tour, just truth. And from that day forward, Malcolm's name began to rise from the ashes, with universities creating archives in his honor, advocacy groups being funded in his name, and murals blooming on walls from Los Angeles to Lagos, each one bearing the message that had survived the machine's attempt to erase it. They can kill the messenger, but not the message. While his hometown renamed a street Warner Way, and the once hidden folder he had labeled Shadow Network was now studied in law schools as the case that cracked Hollywood's golden walls. But perhaps the most powerful moment came from one last piece of footage buried deep in that second hard drive. A file labeled FinalFile.mp4, which Pamela waited to watch until the headlines quieted and justice had begun to take root. And one night, alone in her living room with only a single candle burning, she pressed play, and there was Malcolm, his face tired but calm, his eyes no longer holding fear but a quiet certainty. And then he smiled just once before speaking. "Hey, Mom, if you're watching this, then I guess it's over. Or maybe it's just beginning." His voice steady as he explained, "I didn't do this because I wanted to be a hero. I did it because someone had to. You always told me to speak when it matters most. Well, this matters." Leaning forward to stare directly into the lens as he finished, "They tried to drown me in silence, but I had you, and I knew you'd finish what I started." His voice cracking as he whispered, "I love you, Mom. I'm sorry, but thank you for being the loudest voice I've ever known." And when the screen went dark, Pamela didn't cry. She simply closed the laptop, kissed the worn letter, and whispered, "You were never erased. You were etched into history." And in that moment it became clear that Malcolm would never again be remembered only as a television star, but as a man who stared into the darkness and refused to close his eyes, whose voice was now carried in protests, in murals, in classrooms, and in the very air of a world that had finally woken up to the system that had taken him, a system that was still out there, still breathing, still watching, but now under the weight of public eyes that would not look away. And Pamela's final act in sharing his mission had transformed it into something far bigger than one man's story. It was now a blueprint for dismantling the silence industry itself, and though Bill Cosby remained behind bars, The true victory wasn't his arrest. It was the shift, the awakening, the undeniable fact that the silence had been broken forever, and Malcolm's mission now belonged to everyone, a warning to every predator hiding behind contracts, to every executive who traded truth for profit, to every machine built on fear and cover-ups. Your time is up. Because this isn't the end, it's the beginning, and the message is louder than ever, carried by voices across the globe that will not stop speaking his name until the last wall of that machine comes crashing down.